training camp close to being on its way, I think there's always a fun conversation to be had, and this is always a fun time to focus on not the A-list guys that we're always going to talk about with this team, right? The Odells, the Jarvises, the Nick Chubbs, the Baker Mayfields, the Myles Garretts, the Denzel Wards. There's so many good players on this team that it's kind of hard to get through all of them, but not those guys, right? The regular season is where we're really going to focus on those guys, but there are other guys who might be key for a smaller role in the defense or offense, or guys who might be key for the future that I think are worth paying attention to during training camp. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about who I think are going to be the under the radar training camp standouts this year, and guys to just keep your eye on for the future. But before I get into that, I want to make sure you guys hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and ding that notification bell so you can be notified when I upload. Also want to give a shout out to the patreon.com dog check tier members. And as always, I start with Michael Matique, Nick Merrick, Mike Lopau, Wesson Megan, Tyler Chiz, D.A. Jade, Easley Bash, Joe Hart, Gabriel Wilson, Fred Pratt III, David Valtiar, Relentless Buck, Chunt, Rex Kaufman, Kevin Johnson, DJ Marino V, Edward Carpenter, Matt H, Sign Sheets, Gemini, Liam Freeman, Fight Dirty 74, Yo, Matt Lloyd, Paul Wilcox, Hundo Magnifico, Kyle Stuffer, Lukey from Munich, Deveroff, J Guy 101, Musty Taco, Joe Bobby, Brad Cabo, Dylan W, James McGinley, Arenda Hall, Chad Gimme, David Maldonado, Dylan Hell, Josh Bendorch, Jaleel Salim Jr., Mark M, TJ Showman, Stewart Moore, Cleveland BCI, Robert Jermaine Jr., Dave Mike May, Andrew Hirsch, Curtis Byer, Batman, Bharat Kumar, John Albert, Beerman069, Masayua Buzzer, Roland James, Nemo, Mac House, Reeve Hertz, Philip Wilcox, Marie Vivert, Sean Barron, Goggles Pisano, Corporal Nick Lopez, Dom Gazzulo, Nick Nasty, Ian Whitaker, Colin 216 Christian, Dave Strong, Michael Stone, Billy Moose Gentry, Austin Z, Mark Burnett II, Andre Griffin, Otis Wolf, Dog Pound, Kai Greg Ehlers, Austin Bolin, Lydia Mahawk, Jesus Serrano, Chris Foams, the Picktown Browns backers, Max Nilikenko, Mark Khan, Max Al Dojo, and Water Bear Marketing. Again, guys, thank you so much for the support. It means a ton to me. Now let's talk about these training camp standouts. So like I said at the beginning of the video, again, we're going to spend so much time focusing on the big names and the first quarters of this preseason game. But I think what gives the preseason and the training camp value to a lot of hardcore fans or just casual fans is finding out and learning about some of the other guys on the roster that might not be important this year or might not play the biggest role this year, but will pop up at some point of the season or will be interesting to watch, especially at the end of these preseason games. And the first guy I'm going to go with is Harrison Bryant. He's an interesting case because last year he had an amazing camp. He had such a good camp. We were walking out of training camp last year talking about Harrison Bryant might be the starting tight end or taking David Njoku's job now. It ended up averaging out to where he kind of did get the second amount of snaps and targets, but David Njoku was definitely far more efficient than Harrison Bryant was, and he did have fumble problems. And again, Harrison Bryant did look really good in training camp, but I think what's going to put him over the top this year and what's going to actually accelerate his development is those preseason games, right? He is a guy who did not benefit from the shortened offseason and everything else that went on last year because of all the protocols, because he just didn't get to get a lot of on-field time. And when he did get on-field time, it was very volatile, right? Either he was catching a touchdown or getting a 40-yard pass or fumbling. You know, it was one of those two things with the very limited amount of snaps that he has. Now that training camp's going to be its regular length and we're going to have those 3 preseason games, now he can get 3 to 4 quarters worth of experience in a preseason game and in multiple preseason games. He can have that live contact. He can have that live contact experience and that live game experience. And I really do think for somebody like Harrison Bryant, who showed so much potential last year in training camp, this could be the piece that kind of gets him fully ready for this year if you need him, and definitely next year when you're really going to need him, because you're going to have questions about, are you going to bring Austin Hooper back? You're going to have questions about, are you going to bring David Njoku back? All these things are going to be kind of up in the air, but the one thing you know for certain is that Harrison Bryant is probably going to be on the roster. So it would be nice to see something out of him. And I think the preseason games, getting those live tackle game snaps will be a huge difference maker for Harrison Bryant and really put him over the top when it comes to him being able to make more of an impact than he did last year based on how good he was in practice. The next guy I'm going to go with, and I think this is going to be the guy who, outside of all the big names on the team, is going to be the talk of camp. And this is going to be Donovan Peoples-Jones. I really like Donovan Peoples-Jones. I think that he is one of those guys who is going to be much better in the NFL than he was in college. You guys know how I feel about the University of Michigan and what Jim Harbaugh does out there. I don't think they're really great developers of all those 5 stars that they get. And I think a lot of those guys come out as projects. And if you're patient with the guy, or you're in the position to be patient with the guy, I think you can really hit gold with some of those prospects. And I think Donovan Peoples-Jones is one, because when you look at him on tape, when you look at him physically, 6'2", good amount of weight, good size, big hands, he has all those prototypical wide receiver traits that the Browns wide receiver room doesn't really have, right? We got a lot of 6-foot fast guys. We don't really have the taller, bigger guy that can box somebody out. That is what Donovan Peoples-Jones is, but he's also not slow. And if you look at his production last year, obviously once Odell went out, there was a jump, but I think he really turned the corner in the last 4 games of the season last year. And I am interested to see what he's going to be able to do with a full training camp, what he's going to be able to do with a full offseason behind him, and more importantly, what's he going to be able to do getting those live game reps in the preseason. Again, it's over communicated how important the preseason is to the starters, right? But for the guys that are just below them, the guys that you're trying to groom into future A-listers for this team to continue to be good years and years down the line, that's who the preseason is really important for, right? Because that's when they can get a bulk of their experience. Some guys might get more targets, more snaps, and more receptions in the preseason than they'll get in a full 17-game season. And I think that's where you really develop and grow these players. And I think Donovan Peoples-Jones is somebody who I think by the end of the year, we're going to be talking about him, Odell, and Jarvis kind of around the same light, because I do think he's going to be close to a breakout. Now, I don't think he's going to have like crazy numbers or anything like that. It's a pretty crowded wide receiver room. I think he's going to be good enough playing that Z wide receiver position that you're really going to be able to move around Rashard Higgins and Jarvis Landry and Odell wherever you want, which is going to be key to making sure this offense is versatile. And the last guy, and this is a super under the radar guy that I want to talk about, is D'Ernest Johnson. I think he can come out here and really impress people. He's in a position battle. The Browns drafted a running back in the 6th round this year, so his spot is up for grabs. He knows this. So he has to have a big camp. I really like D'Ernest Johnson. I think he's a good runner. I think he's a skilled guy, and I think he can be a second running back for a lot of teams. I think he will be a second running back for a lot of teams if he doesn't win that battle. The third running back position, I feel like, is always one of the funnest things to watch during training camp. So D'Ernest Johnson, definitely somebody to watch in there. I think he's going to have a fun camp, and I think a lot of people are going to really appreciate D'Ernest Johnson after that. Now let me move on to some of the defensive guys that I think are very interesting. And I'm going to pair these two together because these guys definitely are on that A-list tier of player that I was talking about. But I do think that their impact on the defense is going to be so big compared to what it was last year, and the upgrade from those positions to the players that filled them last year, that it's going to be dominating conversation. That's going to be Troy Hill and John Johnson. Look, these guys are coming from what was one of the best secondaries in football, and they were a huge part of it last year. If you look at PFF grades, John Johnson was ranked number 3 of all safeties. And again, it's not gospel PFF grades, but there are a ton of other metrics you can use that would indicate that John Johnson had a fantastic year last year, and he's been fantastic for a couple of years at this point. And I think the upgrade from just going from John Johnson and having Troy Hill there, 2 teammates, and you're going to have Ronnie Harrison, upgrading from that to what it was at the beginning of camp last season, where you're throwing Carl Joseph and Andrew Sadeo out there most of the time. It's going to be such a drastic change that I think it's really going to be eye-popping and really going to dominate the conversation. I think Troy Hill is going to be one of those really fun camp guys. He's probably going to start a couple camp fights. It's going to be scrappy. He's going to be getting in there with the wide receivers, which is always fun to see. And I think John Johnson, his brain that he brings to this, his knowledge of the game of football is so immense and so good, and his tape last year and the years before was so good that I really think he's going to have a huge impact on this defense right away, and I think it's going to be noticeable to anybody watching. The next guy I want to talk about, I think is going to have a really good camp, is Takk McKinley. This is somebody who needs a good camp. This is probably the last team that's really going to sign Takk McKinley at this point and believe in him enough to put him in a role of any kind of prominence, right? If this doesn't work out for Takk McKinley, it no longer becomes, hey, let me put Takk and sign him and see if he can fill a role on the cheap. It's going to be, let me sign Takk and see if he can make the team. So that's what he's up against, right? He is on his way to becoming a flyer guy in the NFL or a guy who can hold down a role. So he is going to need a really good camp to make sure he gets that spot. In Takk McKinley, his play style, it's all hustle and muscle, right? I think I did a film breakdown a few months ago when the Browns signed Takk McKinley, and it's all hustle and muscle, and that's always fun when you're watching the hustle and muscle guys on the defensive line. He is going to be trying to bull rush guys. He is trying to be physical. He is going to make some big plays in the backfield during camp. I think he's going to be somebody that kind of pops, right? Because we know Myles Garrett is going to be there and he's going to show some flashes of brilliance. We know that to a point, Jadeveon Clowney is going to be there and show some flashes of brilliance. He's done it his entire career. It's just the consistency and the health questions about Jadeveon is really what you worry about. But when those second teamers come out there, when it's Porter Gustin and it's Takk McKinley, I really think Takk is going to have these moments where you really see that first round potential, where you see that first step, where you see his ability to rush the outside shoulder very dominantly and very physically. And I think those are going to be things that are going to leave a strong impression on a lot of Browns fans. And the last guy I'm going to go with, and this is super under the radar, but a guy that I feel like people should prop up a little bit more because I think he did enough at the end of the season last year to kind of get Browns fans a little bit more excited about the potential that this player has. And that's MJ Stewart. Look, this guy has had one heck of a journey throughout the NFL. He was a former second-round pick by the Buccaneers, so maybe you can argue there's some pedigree there that's interesting to go to. Has to sign to the Browns, barely makes the team at camp, and then he really only gets to play because there's a million injuries out there, and he gets thrusted at this slot corner position. But he ends up playing actually really well in the last 2 games of the season. I believe he had an interception in both the Steelers game, but I know he had an interception in one of those games, probably the second one where Ben threw like 6 interceptions. His arrow was ticking up. This is not a guy who's necessarily like a completely unknown commodity, right? This is a former second-round pick, and I think he's at the point in his career where he's actually kind of just settling into where he naturally should be. Maybe he was overdrafted in the second round, and he was always more of a nickel corner instead of somebody you should put on the outside, and I think maybe he's in the right position where he's supposed to be, and I think he could have a big year. I think he has accepted the role that he's in the NFL. I think he's accepted being that slot guy, being the special teams guy, and I think he's going to be a really exciting guy to watch. Again, he's probably not going to be out there a ton when Baker Mayfield's on the field, but when Case Keenum's on the field, he will be out there, and I think he will have some very eye-popping plays, and I think he's going to be a guy that, hey, if you want to put Troy Hill outside and you want to put Denzel Ward to follow on a guy and have Greg Newsome on one side, that you can feel comfortable having MJ Stewart plug in there and play that slot corner position, just in case. I think he, similarly to Donovan Peoples-Jones, is going to allow for a lot of flexibility in the defense amongst many other things. But those are just a few of the guys that I think are going to be interesting to watch. Who are your under-the-radar guys that you think are going to be interesting to watch in the preseason? Again, I really do encourage all Browns fans to find those guys, right? The underneath guys, the guys are going to get a ton of snaps in the preseason to kind of keep an eye on and see what they do, because that's how you kind of get a lot of fun out of the preseason, is watching these guys grow and develop. And now that it looks like the Browns might become a stable franchise, there's going to be more value in that. So again, let me know who you're looking at, who you're excited about watching in the preseason that you might not get to see play a ton in the regular season. Let me know those people down in the comment section below. But again, guys, thank you for watching. Have a great day and have a good night.